legislative, and discuss our legislative priorities for the upcoming General Assembly session. So, of course, we did want to do this in person with a walkthrough to focus on Maury High School, but because of so many scheduling conflicts, we weren't able to do that. And so we've combined this. And so this may be even a more convenient platform for you all, but we're happy to cover both of those very important topics today. So I will go ahead and hand this over to our lovely superintendent, Dr. Sharon Birdsong.
Good morning, everyone. I am Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Sharon Birdsong, and I bring greetings to you on behalf of Norfolk Public Schools. It gives me great pleasure this morning to welcome you to our virtual Take Your Legislators to School Day. On an annual basis, we invite our federal, state, and local legislators, along with members of the Norfolk City Council, to participate in our program. So thank you all for being here and taking the time out of your busy schedules to participate in our program this morning. And today, as Dr. Martin mentioned, we have with us from the General Assembly, we have Delegate Jay Jones, Delegate Angelia Williams-Graves, along with Senator Lionel Sproul. We're also anticipating that Diane Kaufman will be here from Tim Kaine's office, and our illustrious Mayor, Dr. Kenneth Alexander. He is supposed to be joining us as well. And finally, I would like to thank members of our community who have joined us this morning for the special event. We really appreciate that you've taken the time to be with us this morning. And we thank you all of you for what you do, your continued efforts to advocate for Norfolk Public Schools and for public education in general. And that's going to be especially important as we move forward. And as Dr. Martin stated, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've shifted our traditional classroom visits from an in-person model to a virtual model. And we're relying on this technology to give you pictures of the conditions of Maury High School. We've tried with this presentation to give you a sense of what our students at Maury High School see each day when they're in the building, which is the oldest high school in our city. And we have our illustrious building principal here with us today, Karen Berg, and certainly I'm sure there'll be questions for her and she's ready to participate. So each day, our phenomenal teachers, they do everything that they possibly can to protect the health, the well-being, and the academic achievement of our students. And as a division, we strive to attract highly qualified, effective teachers, to be purposeful in developing and sustaining partnerships with our community, and to be intentional in our efforts to foster a division-wide culture of caring. These efforts happen every day in every building and classroom, no matter what. But we must acknowledge that sometimes the physical structures that house our children's education facilities can affect what happens in school. So Maury High School is an example of why we as a school division have committed to improving our aging infrastructure so that our students are educated in buildings that are worthy of them. So I want to thank our staff, our teachers, and our administrators for preparing to receive you today. And I hope you enjoy your virtual Take Your Legislators to School Day experience. And so now I'll ask our school board chairman, Madam Adele Martin, school board chair, to provide an overview of today's events. Dr. Martin, what do we have today?
Thank you.
Excuse me, Dr. Martin, before you get started, could I ask a question? Because it deals with what we were talking about. I'm familiar with Martin, with Maury, but I have not had the opportunity to tour, let's say, Booker T, for example, which is in my district, which I have heard a lot of complaints about the school and good about the school as well. How come we keep going to Maury? I don't heard this a lot of time about Maury. Why can't we go to another school? Why is it always Maury? I want to talk about Booker T. I don't want to talk about Maury. I know enough about Maury already. I want to know something about Booker T and other schools.
Senator Stroll, this is Mr. Clanton. I'll be more than happy to take you to Booker T. Washington High School and also inform you about many of the things that are taking place in preparation for Booker T. Washington High School. I set up a task force when I got on the school board 4 years ago, and have been working directly with administration and community partners and concerned citizens to work on, as well as fought for funding for the feasibility study. So I'll be more than happy to share an additional time out of here about that and to bring you up to speed about what we're trying to do there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the reason that we selected Maury High School was because we had a couple new delegates that were coming on board and wanted them to experience the oldest school. It was built in 1911, and there's been a lot of talk. And of course, many years ago, there were some renovations done to keep that school alive and to protect the historical architecture. But that was a conversation that, we need to move forward and build a better school for our children. And I think that, some people get hung up on their very wonderful memories and experiences in that school and keeping the type of architecture and so forth. But what we want to focus on is a building that is conducive to 21st century learning. And we see that we are spending a lot of resources to keep that building going for some romanticized version of what it used to be. And so, it's just one of those buildings that becomes a little controversial because people are very sentimental about it, but we need to move forward and actually rebuild a school that we can provide, top-notch education in. Not that it's not happening, but again, it's there's a lot of distractions when the of course you've been in it, so you're familiar with the condition of it.
But thank you.
But yes, I mean, Booker T, I love Booker T. Washington. We actually go to Booker T more than I do Maury. So maybe that's another reason. And I'll be happy to attend, go on a tour of Booker T with you as well. Okay, so
if I may.
Yes.
I'm familiar with the Maury history due to the last 10 years of council debates about Maury and what to do and what not to do and why to do. And I'm certain my colleague Delegate Jones is, as well. And so I would just say to you personally, an extensive amount of detail for me is not necessary because it was bad when I was on council, so bad things only get worse. So I don't necessarily, you guys don't have to dig really, really deep. And I do share Senator Spruill's concerns about Booker T, as I heard those as well. And so, I know you said there were some new legislators, and I don't know exactly all who's on the Zoom here, but I just, I'm familiar, just so you have know that I have some background there.
Mm-hmm. We do. We're aware. So we're going to start off though with our agenda, talking about our legislative priorities, and we've brought Mr. Ron Jordan, who's our consultant with Advanced Strategies, and he's worked with us with several years on our legislative priorities, and so he will be reviewing that with you. And then we also have a quick tour of Maury High School, some of the work that's been done recently, and we also have Principal Karen Berg on here to answer any questions if there's anything that sparks your interest. And then what I've asked is to talk more about not just Maury High School, but to talk about the broader plan of facility planning and educational planning and what work has been done. So, Mr. Jordan, please proceed.
He needs some.
Okay, thank you. All right. So this year, the board's priorities are primarily focused on funding related issues. Several reasons. One is that there have been a lot of issues that have been building for several years and have come to a head. Secondly, the impact to the pandemic. And third, the need to move forward and bring some of our practices and programs into the 21st century. So let's start. So the first item there deals with accelerated learning. During the pandemic, there was a fair amount of learning loss. Remote learning, it negatively impacted a lot of kids. The basic thrust of this is the division is focused on addressing those issues, and to continue doing that, we're going to need additional support, particularly for what I would call support wraparound student support services, and those include student tutoring, and it's not necessarily the traditional tutoring that you tend to think of, where you get kids, a small group of kids after school. This is a much more intensive, as well as teacher mentorship. And we're asking that you support these types of programs and when the funding is available. The next one deals with a State Board of Education proposal that would shift the early reading intervention program into the standards of quality, which means it would mandate it and expand it to provide additional reading specialists in the 4th and 5th grades. It would eliminate certain non-staffing permissible expenditures using the state funds. And then lastly, the funds would be distributed based upon the number of kids who should be distributed, based on the number of kids who failed the 3rd grade reading assessment. As it's currently, the money is distributed based on the outcome of the reading diagnostic instrument, which is used in kindergarten, 3rd grade. We believe that by targeting it to kids who actually failed the reading assessment puts the money better where it's needed. This proposal from the state board does involve additional state dollars, which would come with the program also. And we will know next week whether or not the governor is going to include it in his proposed budget. If it is, we ask you obviously strongly to support it. If he doesn't, we'll be coming to see you about some budget amendments to try to deal with it. The next couple of items deal with increasing education equity. The first is another proposal from the state board, which would combine the current at-risk add-on with the prevention, intervention, and remediation programs that are funded in the state budget into a single program, which with expanded funding, which the board supports. However, there is one part of this, there's language associated with it by the state board that would limit a school board's ability to assign teachers. And we'd ask you to reject that language that's included in that SOQ proposal, but accept and approve the additional funding for the consolidation of the programs. It would go a long way in helping school divisions with high levels of poverty. The next issue, it deals with broadband affordability and access. As we all learned, and it was particularly acute in the school divisions, access to broadband was critical. It's almost as critical as electricity, having electricity in your house, especially for people with kids. And while the state and federal government are committing tremendous amounts of funds to broadband, the focus and discussion for the most part has been on expanding coverage. And in urban areas like Norfolk and other parts of the state, the issue is not so much coverage to get access, it's affordability. And so we would ask you to support using some of the money that you've earmarked last fall, and we'll be revisiting again as part of the Federal Infrastructure Act to deal with the issue of affordability.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Sure.
On the issue, the bullet above broadband.
Mm-hmm. The at-risk add-on?
Yes. Okay. So if the language is to prevent or limit the school board's ability to assign teachers, who does it give that authority to? Because somebody's got to assign.
In effect, it's directive. It inhibits its ability to do it by saying that you have to do a certain thing. In other words, it requires that the board direct certain types of teachers to certain types of schools. And that's what we're asking, and the board feels that should be in their discretion, not the state's, not a state directive.
Okay, so something like an example of that would be like a more seasoned teacher being needed in a school that has a greater need for reading enrichment or math enrichment or overall SOL improvement. That would be something that could be, based on this language, could potentially be limited by the board, with the board's authority. Is that what I'm understanding?
Essentially what it would say, it would direct the board, it would require the board to do that, and therefore limit the board's flexibility to deal with the situation on the ground. So if the board had a shortage of teachers in an area and wasn't able to do that without impacting another school, it would limit their ability to do that. The board's intent would certainly be to do what the state board is proposing, is direct experienced teachers in math and such to the neediest schools. But there are times, for practical purposes, you can't do that. And with a mandate from the state, it limits your flexibility.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much.
Mr. Jordan, a question for you?
Yes, sir, Mr. Senator Sproul.
Question that if you do that, what about, would the board have the option to transfer teachers who are not, I don't want to use the word bad teachers, but teachers who are not doing their job? So we have found out in some states, we have found out that the board would removing teachers who are not doing their job, or let me use the word bad teachers in my term, to an area, poverty area, to those schools, and not the good teachers. So, right. So what kind of problem we have that to keep the board from doing that? From moving a bad teacher down to a school that's doing pretty good, but because it's not to their liking, they move bad teachers to a school that they think are not doing good. How can we stop that?
Sure.
Can I just cut in real quick, Mr. Jordan? Senator Sproul, I'm curious about your questioning. Why would you think someone would want to do that? Like, why? That just doesn't sound like something a school board would do, to take a bad teacher and put him in.
You'd be surprised what some school board would do. In some areas, and I'm not going to get into name in some areas, when bad teachers, they move them out of a school that some school boards think that are top-notch school. You have a bad teacher in that school, and you send them to a school, to another area, instead of giving them some training, what have you, but send them to a school that's not doing good, that is not a top-notch school. I'm just saying that I just want to make sure that those schools who are struggling and having a hard time, that you don't send bad teachers down to those schools.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. But Dr. Birdsong, can you speak just briefly about the professional development that we provide to teachers who need it?
Yes, and I'd like to even more so directly address Senator Sproul's concerns. So Senator Sproul, I know in Norfolk, and I can only speak for Norfolk Public Schools, we already have a process in place by which teachers are evaluated annually. And so it is not our practice to move a teacher that's not highly effective from one school to the next to avoid addressing performance issues. We have a professional review board. If there's a teacher in any school in this division that is not performing up to expectations, the building principal is responsible for documenting the teacher's performance and then reaching out to get support for the teacher. So the principal would request a meeting with the professional review board. The professional review board would support the principal's efforts in deciding what professional development would be best suited for that particular teacher. That teacher would likely be placed on a plan of action so that he or she could improve their performance with supports from the building principal, some professional training, some professional development, and given a specific time to make improvements. And if the teacher doesn't improve, then the teacher's contract is not renewed. So that's the process in a nutshell. So I know that in Norfolk Public Schools, we don't move teachers who are not performing at the level that they should from one school to the next. And I hope that addresses your concern, Senator.
It does.
Sproul.
It does. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Jordan, did you have anything to add? I'm sorry that I.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and to answer the senator's question, is there's nothing in the state board regulation that would stop the school board from getting rid of ineffective or getting rid of ineffective teachers.
Thank you.
So the next item on our list here is deals with school construction funding. As you all know, this has been a big topic for the last 4 or 5 years at the General Assembly. And this year, I believe this type of request is in every school division's proposal to its legislative delegation. As you're aware, there was a joint subcommittee working on this issue headed by Senator Jennifer McClellan from Richmond. They've made a number of proposals for action during this session on the issue. We'd ask you to support those. And in addition, we'd also ask that you, if the state's not able to step up in a big way, at least give the local governments the tools that they could raise revenue and dedicate it to school construction. As you probably may remember, you all have approved a number of exceptions where you are allowing a locality to increase the sales tax by 1%, subject to a referendum, and that money must be used for school construction. And you'll probably see requests this year to expand that to just give it statewide authority, that rather than a one-off having approve each local government. But as you're going to see with the video on Maury shortly, and you all are, and you know from your visits there in Booker T and the other schools, you know this is a critical issue. The last item here is a perennial, and it's really probably more critical now than ever, and that's removing the support cap, the support staff cap. As you may recall, during the Great Recession, Governor Kane proposed and the General Assembly approved a cap on the amount of state funding for support staff. Now, support staff includes, you think about, a lot of people will say, well, teachers are important. Why you need all these support staff? Well, they're critical. Teachers can't function without these support staff. And that's instructional support people, attendance people, security people, transportation, including bus drivers, mechanics, the people that make the technology in schools run, the people that take care and teach and train on the computers, the cafeteria workers, the maintenance people, and who maintain the facility, and the janitors. So what that action did, though, it transferred the $750 million in costs direct from the state directly to the local school divisions. The intent was for this to be temporary. But the General Assembly, particularly in the House at that point, said, no, we want it to be permanent. Well, it shorts the school divisions. It was never intended by the original proponent, meaning Governor Kane at the time, to be a permanent thing. And it has cost $750, and the amount actually grows over time. But it is costing school divisions money that the state should be paying, that the school division could be using for other educational purposes. And and you'll frequently hear the argument from legislative staff, well, it's really hard to do, or well, there are ways to begin peeling that onion back over a period of 2, 3, 4 years, so that it's certainly quite affordable and will do and restore the practice the way it has been for 50 years prior to that, and undo the damage done to the local school finances with that. And in that vein, I just kind of put a corollary on that. I'm sure everyone saw it yesterday or day before. The governor announced a pay raise of 5% in the first year of the biennium for SOQ instructional staff, and another 5% in the second year, which I think everyone applauds. Well, remember though, that is only the state funding for the SOQ teacher mandated teachers and instructional staff. So if the school division has more teachers in it than is required by the state, they're not paying for that. They're not paying for any of these support staff that we talked about. And in addition, even the state money is going to have to be matched using the formula in the local composite index. That's going to meeting that matching requirements going to be a challenge for a lot of localities. One way to help with that is to fund the support, restore funding for the support cap. That then frees up money that can be used by the school divisions to match the pay raise and take full advantage of it. So with that wrap up, there are a number of position statements there that we'll be emailing this document to you shortly. There are a number of position statements there that you can read at your leisure, and be happy to answer any more questions. Back to you, Dr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. I appreciate your presentation and answering the questions. So we will move on to our next agenda item, and which is the tour of the virtual or video tour / presentation of Maury High School. Dr. Pohl? Yes,
Dr. Maureen.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm deferred to State Delegate Williams Graves.
Okay, I just had a quick question on the funding piece that Mr. Jordan went over earlier. You said there were ways to peel it back, and you also mentioned that in the governor's budget, it didn't support it. It basically, what I'm understanding you're saying is that it supports the necessary amount of teachers, but if a school has additional teachers because there is additional need, that 5% doesn't cover that, and then it also doesn't cover the entire set of employees of a school. So then that would be left to the school board. But that piece about the $750 million for support staff, and you mentioned that there were several ways to go about that. Would you outline maybe one or two that would be options for us to consider in terms of starting that funding conversation, as well as what is the number? If it was $750 million in 2009, then I'm not going to go with this doubled in 10 years, but it's probably pretty darn close.
Yeah.
So what kind of numbers are we looking at right now?
Let me send you the numbers and separately.
Okay.
But to give you an example of how you could begin peeling that onion back, you return to what's called the prevailing cost method of funding those positions instead of having an arbitrary limit that says we're going to fund 1 to 3, something like that. And you just, whatever the positions are, you just funding the however many number of positions are, you're funding the prevailing cost, which is a big part of the funding model. And that's the way it used to be. But you start doing it in phases so that instead of funding the prevailing cost for however many there are of all of them, you start doing it by category. So the logical way to start is you lift the cap and return to the old method of funding certain categories. For example, health, mental health positions, and security positions, which are two of them are really important to student success. The other is a big cost factor for schools and with the school security officers. So that's one. And then you do that for 2 years. Then the next biennium, you come back and add a couple more categories to it. And over 2 or 3 biennia, you're back to where you were before the Great Recession.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Now, one last question for you. I remember that at some point in time, we hired, or the school board hired several, or there were positions available for several math specialists, reading specialists, all of that. Are those positions still valid positions in terms of, I know the need is there, but do we have them filled, or do we have money that we're not spending because we can't find people to fill them? How is that? That was probably about maybe 5 years ago. I think we were having that conversation about
That's
the
a
math
Dr.
specialists and the reading specialists and all that.
That's a Dr. Birdsong question.
And you have a good memory. So yes, years ago, I don't want to misspeak because I wasn't superintendent at that time, but I believe there was some additional funding provided to the school division specifically to hire reading and math specialists. And at that time, I think it did happen. And I also believe that perhaps under the former administration, that for whatever reason, because of budget cuts, I think many of those positions were eliminated. So we're working at this point, we do have reading and math specialists assigned for every school. And unfortunately, we've not been able to fill all of those positions because of the shortage across the nation with teachers. But we have in Norfolk Public Schools started our own Grow Your Own programs. And so we partnered like with Old Dominion University to support the mathematics specialist program, and William and Mary to help us get to be able to train more reading specialists. So we're very optimistic. We're moving in the right direction. And certainly they are valuable positions that we could not do without.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I hope that that partnership will extend over to Norfolk State as well with their new administration. I know that Dr. J is very interested in partnering with Norfolk Public Schools. Helpful. So,
and we've shared that with them, that we are ready, and whenever they are ready, we are ready to partner with them.
Good deal. Thank you so much. So and Dr. Birdsong, you tend to remember those conversations when you sit through all the meetings.
I believe you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a couple of questions from my colleagues, Ms. Basine and then Mr. Clanton.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. I appreciate the question about the support staff. And as we peel back that onion, I can't advocate hard enough for the need for mental health supports. Just as we are in the midst of a pandemic, we are also very much in another public health crisis, which is our students' mental health and mental health in general for adults and children. But since we are in the business of educating children, I really would like to speak to that. And as we talk about academic achievement, which, we all know we have significant needs across the board, but we also have to think about the conditions for learning, which, is food security, home security, and mental health. And so we have, I think the General Assembly has reduced the ratio for school counselors, but we really need counselors who are qualified to deal with mental health issues. We also need board certified behavioral specialists. As you've probably been hearing from districts across the country, districts have been seeing an increase in school violence, an increase in mental health needs in general. And I can't speak enough about that need. So if I were to ask for specific attention and support, as far as that support staff, those categories, that is where I feel like our greatest need is. And, I'd be happy to talk to you one-on-one about that, at another time, but I would just wanted to take that time to advocate for those positions.
Thank you, Ms. Basine. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Clanton.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. And again, good morning, everyone. I haven't officially said that. And I appreciate the time of our legislative partners in Richmond being with us this morning. Yesterday, we saw the governor did a presentation about the security. We're pretty much talking about our police officers, state officers, and there's also been discussion that in the governor's proposed budget, he's proposing a 10% pay raise increase for our teachers. I think our superintendent has alluded when we talked about, having specialists. One of the greatest challenges that we have is filling positions and also ensuring that those who are in the classroom feel that they're valued, and really working, many of us who are in the working environment right now, the employees are really making those choices. They're making those choices about where they want to go, and they're particularly making those choices about pay and compensation. So as we're moving into this, which we really haven't addressed here, we have a lot of changing landscape, and we're moving into this particular General Assembly. Do you think this 10% increase may happen for our teacher pay raises? And are there any other particular things that we've asked for here that you think might be a challenge, or things that we might be able to support you as you're there in Richmond and advocating here locally? And I'll just open that up to any of our legislative partners.
May I start off, please?
Yes, sir.
In Virginia, the law requires that we have a balanced budget. And all this governor has done was give a proposal. That's it. His proposal, let me use for example, let's say we were $2 billion, an example, in the hole, starting December 31st. And the law requires that in January, this governor gives to the General Assembly a proposal saying, hey, we were the whole as December 31st, January, here's the new budget, we're out of that. The law requires that. He proposed these things. And some of those things that you were talking about, I can either support the 10% because all my kids in education, I told them don't do it because you don't make enough money. Bless their hearts. So I told them don't do that. Dr. Bird, I see you smiling, but I told my kids don't do it because they don't make enough money. Give y'all more money. I can support everything he has done. The kids this, but it's just a proposal. That's all it is. And we can look at it and we can chop it up and what have you. But when the final analysis is done, we will have a balanced budget. Everything that he has put forward to us, remember, he's gone. After January, the second week of January, we got a new king. We can look at that proposal and say, yes, I like this. Those things that he proposed, yes, I can support it. But will it stand? I have no idea.
If I may, as the newest member of the General Assembly, I would encourage you all to, a lot of you do the professional education, you do conferences where you meet members of other boards across Virginia. And so I would encourage you to reach out to your friends on other boards across Virginia and encourage them to support the governor's amendments, because we, like Senator said, we have a new king. We also have a new majority. And it has often seemed like to me through my time on council that the General Assembly members, which in the time I was on council, they were primarily Republican, kind of assaulted public education. And so I know that as Democrats, we have supported public education. We see the need for public education. We see the need for teachers and public education as it was intended to be. There's a whole nother conversation that you guys are going to have probably very sooner rather than later, is on charter schools, based on some of the things that have been said by the governor-elect. And so you all are going to need to have those conversations as well, and let us know as your legislators what it is that you expect from us. And if we can't prevent it, how do we mitigate it, and how do we make it, better for our children, especially those in districts that look like mine and Jay's and Senator Sproul's, where, there's a great need. So I would also, I would encourage you to reach out to your partners in other school districts and encourage them to support, to reach out to their legislators and support the governor's amendments, because it really does take the majority to get these things, passed. And then the last thing I do want to ask is kind of a pivot to a different question, but board member Basim brought it up, and I'm glad that she did. And it might be a little in the weeds, but I think it's important when you talk about mental health. Dr. Birdsong probably could answer this question best. When we have community violence and community shootings, what happens in the schools, in those schools that are districted where those community shootings have happened over the weekend, overnight, whatever. What happens? What's available? And is it, okay, we did this for a couple of days, we're moving on, not necessarily because you don't care, but we still have a job to do. What happens with those children? Because other than stuff at home that kids might have to be dealing with, there's a whole nother level of stuff
Absolutely.
that
We
kids
know.
have to that they
We
have
know.
to deal with in certain communities. And nowadays it's not even certain communities. I mean, I remember listening to a child that said, I can't go to the mall, I'm scared to go to the movies, I'm scared. I mean, it's like there is this inherent fear now that our children have just growing up and walking down the street or going to the mall, or I mean, we used to go to arcade, but they don't do that anymore. But you know what I mean? That kind of thing. How are schools handling that?
The struggle is real. So I appreciate you bringing forth all of that. So we have a very organized effort to address that. We have a crisis team. We have school level crisis teams and a division level crisis team. So when we learn of a tragic incident in the community, or maybe even a child has lost a loved one or something like that, the division level team gets together, and that's comprised of our head of student wellness, Dr. Moore. He supervises all of the school counselors, the school social workers, and school psychologists. They talk about the information. Certainly, they have communication with the building principal, who likely knows more about the family and who the child's teacher or teachers are. They have a conversation about what needs to happen, and then they are deployed out to the school the following day, and children are allowed to speak to the counselors throughout the day and ask for additional supports. Even the teachers have access to the same types of supports. And so while that has proven to be somewhat effective, certainly we could do more in that area, because as you have just stated, community violence, things happening in communities, it comes into the schools, and the schools end up having to address a lot of what is going on in the community, because schools are microcosms of the community. And so we have found ourselves, especially during this pandemic, of having to manage a lot of crisis situations that spill over from the community into the schools. So I appreciate your question around that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair. This is Ron Jordan. With regard to the charter schools, the last bullet in the position statements stakes out the board's position on charter schools. So the board has had some discussions on it, and we've kind of fought that battle before and prepared to do it again. But the last bullet in there in the position statements addresses that they're opposed to diverting any money from public schools to support charter schools or vouchers.
Absolutely. I don't know if any of you have read the Wall Street Journal article by Michael Bloomberg, where he's offering, was it like $650 million for charter schools in 20 states. So, we've already begun talking about movement. When people are putting real dollars behind it, that it's going to be, there's going to be applications. So, but we do have some local groups that have talked about potentially going through the process. We haven't, to my knowledge, Dr. Birdsong, correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't seen any applications as of yet, but we are on guard. Of course, we are going to, I always say, defend public education to the end, because it is just, I don't have to tell you how important it is to our democracy and to our citizens, our city, and so on. So we will, if there's any questions you have, please reach out to us to have these discussions, because again, I have to say, Norfolk has done pretty well through all of the latest divisiveness that's been going on in a lot of school boards over masking and vaccinations and reopening and closing and so on and so forth. I want to take this moment to really thank everybody, our unions, our teachers, our administrators, our leadership team, for really creating a culture of discussion and civility as we move forward and really focus on what is best for our children's education. And we really have, and I knock on wood and say a prayer every day, that we haven't really gotten into that, the screaming matches and the, by political divisiveness in our boardroom, and it's really allowed us to do the work at hand and stay focused on our students. So
Dr. Birdsong, let me start off by saying I'm old school. I do not and I will not ever support charter schools.
Right. I agree with you.
Don't even talk to me about it. Waste your time.
Yes.
All
yes.
right. Thank you.
We are just give us all the resources that we need to,
I agree. I got
continue the journey, right? So
yes.
I appreciate that, Senator Spruill. I really do. Anyone else? I'm looking for hands up. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on quickly to our next item, which is focusing on Maury High School. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pohl. Please proceed. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Martin. Good morning, everybody. Legislators, board members, administration, and guests. I am James Pohl. I'm the proud Chief Academic Officer of Norfolk Public Schools, and I'm here this morning to share photos that show the condition of Maury High School. As you may know, Maury High School first admitted students in 1910, so 111 years ago, and it is the oldest high school in Norfolk. The building has had additions completed in 1929, 1955, 1977, and again in 1988. Maury has hosted generations of students. As you'll see in the next few slides, a great majority of the damage has been caused over time by water intrusion. Here we see a portion of the first floor book room with beams supporting the steps and the foyer above, which makes this space unusable for storage. These braces in the first floor book room support the main foyer of the building immediately above the space. Within the doorway, under the main entry stairs, we see additional supports that were recently added to secure the front stairs. The next three slides.
Are you saying this support is supporting the main entryway? Like the foyer when thousands of people walk into the building? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the next three slides will show damage to the ceiling and walls in Maury's auditorium. The ceiling has been repaired previously and is again showing signs of water damage. The plaster's flaking and falling to the floor. The plaster around the date stone is showing its age and the signs of water damage. And here we see one of the several seats that has had to been sectioned off from use due to falling plaster. Now we move to the second floor stairwell. Here we see cracking and water damage around the window. In a closer picture, we see that the gap in this crack is expanding over time. And this photo shows the metal supports above that window that are rusting through the plaster coverings. And this is the image of the view of the entire window area in that stairwell. Moving to the outside, windows on the third and fourth floors on opposite sides of the buildings have black wooden braces on them to prevent the decorative finish over the windows from cracking even further. As you may know, pieces have broken off in the past and fallen to the ground. The wooden braces appear on the windows for the length of the entire building. Back to the inside, the next images show damage to plaster on window frames in Maury's fourth floor hallway. And more plaster peeling due to water intrusion. Here we see a window in a science classroom. The yellow and green items visible in the lower portion of this image are mop heads placed near the window just to absorb water from rain that may come into the window. Here's a close-up of the wall next to the window with the plaster cracking as well. And another wall in the same classroom near a window. As seen here, all the windows in this classroom bear the same type of damage. This image shows a crack in the second floor hallway on the floor. Hallways on the third and fourth floors have similar cracks near the same location. These decaying pipes are in the ceiling of the weight room. And this is just above the door used by staff to head to the administrative parking lot and by student athletes headed out to practice. This is the same area where the door frame itself is rusted. And the cracked door frame as well as damage to the floor. And this picture shows one of several particular holes. This one is in the cafeteria wall and it shows a corner bead that's rusted through and caused some expansion, so the plaster cracks. And then beyond those pictures, there are hidden issues within the building as well. The HVAC was last replaced in 1986, and there are plumbing problems throughout the building just caused from the age of the pipes. So although Maury High School has hosted generations of Norfolk students and holds an important place in our city's history, there are several repairs and ongoing repairs that are needed in the building. Thank you for allowing me to share these photos with you this morning. If you have questions, Mr. Fraley, our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Johnson, our Senior Coordinator for School Plan, and Ms. Berg, the proud principal of Maury High School, are here to assist with those questions. Thank you.
So I want to go back to the question of why are we talking about Maury High School again? And it's because we want to focus on the greatest need, because for years there have been a lot of talk about Maury High School and we're ready to take action. And so I'm really happy to entertain any questions that you may have. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move on and talk about the action that is being done. Go ahead, Dr. Gabriel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. I would like for Principal Berg, if she can, to discuss a typical day for her, because we know that, you know, the building facade is a facade and teaching and learning is the most important thing that happens in the building. But I would like for her to convey to our wonderful guests that are joining us today just how important and how much of an impact it is having on her everyday operations in order to deliver effective education.
Good morning, Dr. Gabriel, and thank you all for the time to, and as Dr. Paul said, proud principal of Maury High School. This is starting my 11th year as the principal. And we do face the challenges. You know, I recall students coming in from a neighboring city for Scholastic Bowl and listening to the kids in the hallway trying to defend why the classroom looks the way it does. And it broke my heart. When you come up the steps and you come in the foyer, it's actually beautiful. But the questions that were posed, you know, are those beams holding the foyer? Are those beams holding the stairwell? They are. The concerns were so grave about underneath the stairs that I'm the only one who has a key. We don't want anyone to be able to get in there. Typical to anybody that's 111 years old. The pipes don't work. We get hot, we get cold, we're creaky. The stairways, the stairwells, they're very narrow. We have issues, of course, with internet accessibility, and the district is working with us all the time to support children having the opportunity that they deserve. When it's raining, all those classrooms on the third floor leak. And we're not talking about a drip, we're talking about rivers. Mr. Johnson, of course, and Mr. Fraley could talk to those situations. We had some plumbing issues here that we've been trying to resolve for years, where after the young men use the bathroom on the first floor, as the day goes on, the rooms above that area on the third and the fourth floors smell like urine. My kids deserve the absolute best. And I don't want to take anything away from any Norfolk Public School students. I've been in Norfolk Public Schools for 29 years. Booker T deserves just as much. Lake Taylor, I spent 17 years at Lake Taylor High School. I'm invested in the city, but I want what's absolutely best for my children. And I think just as simple as the auditorium, we have roped off areas. Architecturally, I'm being told that nothing's going to fall. I was here when the tile fell that weighed 700 pounds, but I can't have a parent sit in a seat and plaster fall on their shoulders. So we've had to section off major areas of just the auditorium. And it's hard for me to defend that when we come in to recognize, for example, next week, our seniors in the medical health program, where we're going to do the white shirt ceremony, and people come in and they look. And then I have to spend time defending that it's safe for their students and why it looks the way it does. And I try to tell the very best story I can, but it's hard. And I think Delegate Graves said she's seen it before, and we've all seen it, but it's just getting worse. We focused on the 4th floor because that's just where we started. The same issues are in 85% of the classrooms. The teachers cover the classrooms with paper so they don't have to look at it, and the students don't have to look at it. So that's kind of our daily struggles that we have here at Maury High School, just with the condition of the building.
Thank you, Dr. Berg. Are there any more questions or comments?
Madam Chairman, thank you. That was very helpful, and I wish we really can do something about that. But I'm only can go by what I know. Don't live in Norfolk, live in Chesapeake. But I go by the schools that I visit, who really need help just as much as Maury High School. What is that school called? Angel, when you go down, turn off of Brampton, make a right turn on Virginia Beach Boulevard, go under the bridge, the elementary school on the left-hand side.
You're talking about Ruffner?
No, the other way. The other way. What I'm saying, I went in, they had holes, they had pots on the floor, ceiling was leaking.
Lindenwood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So now with that, that's
elementary.
So I just want to know exactly. We got this about Maury High School. I agree with that, but I don't know what's going on in Norfolk. That's between y'all. But I'm saying I'm looking at schools that I visit, other than Maury High School, and that school in Lindenwood, that school is in really bad shape. I went to a fire school. Wait a minute, let me finish. I went to a school over there by Centennial General Hospital, Norfolk. That's a nice school. I went to that one. I left that and went to the other school. And I said, "Ooh, this school in bad shape." Then when I went to Booker T, the asbestos probably having that Booker T and all. And now I've been here in the Senate now 5 years. I'm hearing the same problem about Maury. I'm also hearing the same problem about Booker T. And I'm saying, so are we putting our effort just on one school? Because that, and I'm saying, when I've had the tour of Maury High School, and it certainly needs to be done. But I'm saying about how come no one, Mr. Ron and George, have agreed to give me a tour of Booker T. I just went on the outside and teachers who I have talked to. So I'm saying that we concentrate our efforts on just one school, knowing that I went to other schools that's really in bad shape, just as Maury's in bad shape. And like I say, I don't get into what's happening at y'all school, but what y'all doing, that's your problem. But I'm talking about schools that are in my district that I'm looking at. That school, Booker T is in bad shape. That school, Lindenwood, I guess you call it, that's in bad shape. I went there, so I said, whew. So I'm saying, so I want to know, are we putting all our eggs in one basket, looking at those schools? I want to know what's going to be done at Lindenwood. I want to know what's be done at Booker T as well as Maury.
Madam Chair, if I may respond to the Senator. Senator Sproul, I appreciate definitely from your perspective, and I appreciate being very transparent to let us know. However, I want to take it back. In July of this particular year, my board colleagues, a majority of this board, voted to approve a 5-year capital improvement plan. For years, Norfolk Public Schools was operating and trying to support all 40 plus buildings with about $3 million. to keep them up to date. And so this is what you get. You get backlog. But I'll just answer directly to you. Are we all putting all our eggs in at Maury High School? Absolutely not. We have directed our superintendent and administration to begin and continue the talks with the city, and they have done that. And out of that, I'll speak to it because I represent Ward 3, which Lindenwood, Jaycox, a lot of those other schools are under, and of course, Booker T. Washington High School are all included in that. And one of the things that the administration's come to us is a plan that helps us to focus on addressing some of the major conditions right now: roofs, HVAC, windows, doors. And so we've been able to utilize being very creative in the funds that we have without being able to have direct state dollars to do construction, but the necessary funds that we've gotten from the federal and local to address those, as well as I've said, we've got to walk and chew gum at the same time. So we're addressing some of the immediate things while we're also looking down the road. Down the road, the plan has looked at a new Maury High School. The plan has looked at a new Jaycox Elementary School. The plan has also looked at Norview Elementary. I don't know if you've been in Norview Elementary, but we've got our kids are sitting in mobile units, several mobile units. There's more mobile units in classrooms than there probably are inside the actual building there. So we realize and recognize that there are challenges that are there. And this is where we really have to grab and hold on with our partners at all levels to get the necessary funding. That's why we have it in our legislative priorities to help us do that. Unfortunately, it would take almost, I think Dr. Bursong was at almost like 50 years or something if we just tried to drag this thing all the way out. So when we look at schools like Lindenwood, we got a proposal that talked about consolidation, talked about taking some schools offline. We can't renovate every school. And when we talk about the equity issues and being able to diversify and move, it's also been said that many of our schools are segregated. And we know the history and about some of the smaller schools that are put in place. So when you see Maury High School, I'll be everybody knows I am a proud Maury Commodore. However, I remember in 2011 attending the 100-year anniversary. I also remember getting word that that was on a Saturday. On that Sunday morning, the corner facade of Maury High School fell off. Nobody was there, thank goodness. But when we start talking about the safety, when we look at our high schools, Maury is one of those major ones there. But I will say, and Mr. Fraley will probably back this up here, I think we're beginning phase 1 of the HVAC replacement at Booker T. Washington High School starting in the spring. And then we will continue with that. There's several $1 million that will go into Booker T. Washington High School. And I have said this over and over again, working with partners, that when you look at Booker T is the youngest of all of our high schools. It was built right around the same time when you look at the Indian River and some of those other schools in Chesapeake. But Chesapeake, I will give credit in the respect that they were able to come in at the 50-year mark and be able to do a large refresh. And many of those schools look new. And I think that that's something very much what we can do with Booker T. Washington High Schools, putting the necessary resources behind to refresh that. Booker T the walls aren't falling down. There are some things that are critical that need to be done. But when we look at the most dire need to ensure safety, Maury High School, and we cannot operate less than the 5 high schools that we have in place, that we have to put those resources. But we're also looking at taking some schools offline, redistributing. And that's one of the discussions I know that Dr. Martin will probably speak to, that we as a board will continue that conversation and then putting those things into action.
Thank you, Mr. Clanton. Yes, I think this is the perfect segue to our next presentation, which talks about our 10-year capital improvement plan.
No, ma'am, I'm not ready to move to the next one. I'm not ready yet. My question, I appreciate what he's saying, but I didn't go to Maury High School. And I went to Carver in Chesapeake. That was before you was born. When we couldn't go to school with white folks, okay? So don't tell me about Maury High School. And I know for a fact that the pressure's been put on for the community and all, as far as Maury High School, the history of Maury High School. Maury High School history before Black folks started going there wasn't that good as far as Black folks concerned before. It's good now because everybody goes there now. See, I know the pressure's been put on Maury High School, and I'm hoping that you will get a new school. But my thing is that I asked the school board members, how many of y'all have really went to that poor school, Lindenwood, which is in a Black neighborhood? That school is to shut down right now. Go look at it. Also, I'm concerned that when you have a dedication into a new school, Let's hit the one in Camp Stella. It's a fine school. What's that one on Camp Stella River Road?
The STEM Academy.
Yes, ma'am. Now I went there and I asked a question. I said, how come all the school board members are not here? This is a nice school. The one that was on Princeton Road program, that how come all they're not here? This is a nice school. Well, it's not in our district. But you a member of the school board for all the schools, just because they don't vote for you, not in your district, but you the member of the school board for all the schools. So to me, I don't bother about Maury. To me, I'm hearing from the community that pressure being put on y'all to because Maury High School, historical high school. I could care less about Maury, the historical high school, because before Black folks started going there, they didn't mean nothing to me. So I'm concerned about those schools in the community, such as Lindenwood School that's falling down. I'm concerned about Booker T High School. You can't patch it up. You can't patch it up. If you can build a new school in a River High School in Chesapeake, we make sure in Chesapeake that school is kept up to date and is not kept up to school. So I'm saying, if you could do more High School, go either shut down Lindenwood School or put the kids somewhere else. That's a pitiful school. And I'm saying, and I'm not bound to say, don't live in Norfolk. I love Norfolk to death because Andrew knew I love Norfolk to death. But I could care less what y'all do about Maury High School, because I'm from South Norfolk. I went to all Black high school, and pressure being put on was told me by the school board to look out for Maury High School because it's a historical thing. The historical stuff in Maury High School before Black folks start going there can mean nothing to me. Thank you.
Just for clarification, though, sorry, Mr. Clanton, just a minute. We just had a school board meeting at Southside STEM Academy. You know, I'm at the Southside at Tucker Library. I was at the opening of Tucker Library. I've been involved in that process. We're not shying away from going to any schools, and I agree. Campus Stella is a beautiful school. So I just don't want it to be out there that we're somehow avoiding certain schools. I mean, and neither, you know, it's not in my district, but I'm here to serve the entire city. And I think I speak on behalf of all of my colleagues as well. Mr. Clinton, can you briefly?
Yeah, just briefly, you know, and I appreciate, you know, I have utmost respect for Senator Sproul. And as far as Lindenwood, I agree with you. That is a proposal that's been submitted to us. We haven't taken care of that yet, but this board is going to address that. We have conversations coming up, but we have proposals that have been sent to us. But I want to make it very clear that there's no, I don't know what's been said in the community, but there's no uninhibited pressure being placed on me in regards to Maury High School. I care about all of our schools, and I'll make it very transparent as an alum, it doesn't matter, but I serve and represented in my ward, Booker T and Norview. So I have been very, very laser-like focused on making and ensuring Booker T. Washington High School. But I'd love to keep to touch base with your senator and just to wrap even more, and any of our legislative partners to come in and to see and to hear from you as to different ways that we can gather our community and to gather support to get these things. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Okay. Out of respect for time, I will turn it over to Mr. Rick Fraley. Is he still here?
I am. Good morning.
Okay.
Good morning to our state legislators, our board members, my colleagues, and Dr. Birdsong. This morning, I will share with you how we develop our capital improvement plan. We have hired a consultant group to evaluate 44 of our school buildings. They reviewed 23 components for each building to evaluate the overall facilities condition. Some of those 23 components that they have evaluated are roofs, HVAC systems, windows, doors, the electrical capacity, plumbing, fire systems, and elevators. They use a mathematical formula to evaluate these components to develop an overall facilities condition index score for each school. They rate each component as a priority 1, 2, 3, or 4, and that rating informs us of the expected replacement timeframe. A priority 1 rating means to replace or repair the component now, and a priority 4 rating means to replace or repair within the next 10 to 15 years. When they totaled up our rating needs and our priority replacement needs, we received a projected cost to complete all the work and repairs of $605 million. And these are pre-pandemic projections. This was completed in 2020. but that is the total for all 44 schools and all repairs needed. The team that develops that plan consists of all senior staff at our facilities division, led by Mr. Danny Johnson, our CFO, Mr. Jenkins, our architects that we have on retainer, our consultants that assist us with facilities planning, Mr. Buddy, and myself. And that team I just referenced has developed a CIP plan that calls for the replacement or renovation of one of our high schools, which is currently identified as Maury, and 3 of our elementary schools. And they are identified as Norview Elementary, Jaycox Elementary, and Granby Elementary. All of the aforementioned schools are 70 years or older. We have also planned to replace or repair 30 additional components that we refer to as the Big Four. Repair 30 schools for these components that we refer to.
For facilities is that number is very overwhelming to them. Of course, it's a number that's been building, like you said, a bad building, bad building gets worse, if it's being ignored. And so it had been ignored for a lot of years. We've been fortunate enough to be able to tackle the needs that have been, like you say, we're kind of addressing the needs as they come, but we really need to get out in front of this. And so we've directed Dr. Birdsong and her administration to start having conversations with our cities, because that's, we need to partner with our city council to really lay out a long-term plan. No more of this band-aiding things as they come. It's not working. And it's way too expensive. It's not a good use of our resources. And so Dr. Birdsong's team has been meeting with our city. And I just want you to know, whenever you see these funds and the numbers that are attached to them, please do not get discouraged. Do not become overwhelmed by the large numbers, because you see, it is the best use of our funding moving forward. And so what I'm asking you is to stop kicking, I know it's not just you, but what I'm asking from the delegation is stop kicking the can down the road. Let's get this done. And let's move on to the other schools that are on the list that our consultants have given us, that we've worked, to over. If you have been paying attention to our school board meetings, when we talk about facilities, a lot of the things we've done, like the enveloping, replacing doors, HVAC systems, all the wonderful things we've been able to do recently. But we need to have a long-term plan, which we are working on. But that funding is the only thing keeping us between our planning and the next step of actually implementing and building new buildings. And of course, that doesn't happen overnight. That's a 3 to 4 year process. And so our time is now. We are putting everything, we are laying the groundwork for that. And so we need your support anytime you see something that helps us move that more expeditiously to get our to rebuild or renovate our schools, or consolidation work that's going to have to happen because of our enrollment, and maybe we might have a discussion around moving a school so it makes more sense to where people are, families are living. Please support us in all those efforts.
So 2 things. One is I would very much like to see a community effort in the Maury situation. It's not in my district, but
it's in Norfolk.
It is in Norfolk, and I'm a lover of Norfolk. But there are a lot of affluent philanthropists who have come from Maury, whose families have come from Maury, and I would really like to see all of those individuals who have something to say about the new Maury that we've been talking about for 10 years, put their money where their mouth is, number one, especially when folks are coming to the state for, something as specific as a particular school. The second thing, I'm going to go back and piggyback on the mental health issue and just offer a suggestion. We went over to the CHKD, the new CHKD mental health hospital a few weeks ago, and there's already a partnership with instruction in teachers and instructionalists. I'm not sure if I'm using the right language there, but working with students who are Norfolk Public School students who are hospitalized in the mental health wing. We were talking to Bryant Thomas, and there is that. What I would suggest in terms of getting qualified mental health providers that actually work in the school is maybe being able to work with CHKD in that CHKD is a nonprofit. And so that has some benefits in terms of their recruiting with regard to folks who have student loans and how they get them forgiven or something or another like that. So there might be some opportunity there where some of the mental health providers at the CHKD hospital may be able to spend some of their time in our public schools and provide that additional support. It just came to me as school board member Tanya was talking about the mental health piece and the need for qualified folks. We've got to use all the resources that we can and all of the partnerships that we can. And I don't even know what that begins to look like, but because they have that facility, there may be an opportunity to bring some of those counselors and therapists out of the hospital to the children and young people, as opposed to making the children and young people go to the hospital. So just a thought.
Yeah. And even pre-pandemic, actually, I'm a King's daughter, so I help raise money for the hospital. I'm very familiar with it. And I'm also on the Speakers Bureau for the mental health hospital. We had some of those discussions. Of course, there is, 2-3 years ago, we were talking about partnering, and because the doctors and staff there, they're serving our children. It's all the same children, right? So, but to make it more accessible is important. And Dr. Birdsong, would you like to talk about some of the efforts that have been made? Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and again, I appreciate that, that if you're referring to the state operated program, we actually just hired a principal for that program, and she is a Norfolk Public Schools employee. So we do have an existing partnership, and we've already started having conversations about what we can do moving forward, because this is a very new program and we're excited and we're looking forward to expanding this partnership. But the principal of that school, that state operated school at CHKD, is our employee. So yes, we're on it.
Thank you, Dr. Birdsong. Ms. Basine?
Thank you, Dr. Martin. I just wanted to, I appreciate the questions that Delegate Graves has asked along this front, and I couldn't agree more about there being a bridge between what we are able to provide in the schools, as well as, bridging the services in the schools with the services that are available in the community, for that holistic wraparound for our students. But I also at the same time feel that those services within our schools are incredibly important, because right now you will hear teachers say, I have to be social worker, teacher, counselor. So when we talk about morale, we talk about, teaching and learning, and having that time to do that, having those resources in the building, as well as that community partnership, that bridge with our community partners, is incredibly important. And if I may go back, the mental health piece, when I think about it in conjunction with some of the other topics that we have discussed here today, even back to, having effective teachers in our high poverty schools. I mean, let's talk about that piece. Let's get at the root. We have here, I know, between Senator Sproul and you, Delegate Graves, we have veteran public servants here with us today. And so you are both very well aware of Norfolk's having some of the highest racially isolated schools or segregated schools in the Commonwealth. And having such challenges in those neighborhoods, which also come into the schools, we have to be providing better opportunities for our students, more diverse opportunities for our students, and really look at that as well, because that is tied to all of these different areas. And over the years, as you know, like one of the things that some board members have advocated very hard for is to, as we talk about this educational planning, as we talk about new buildings, one of the key pieces, one of the overarching goals has to be in creating more socioeconomically balanced schools. And so that has to be a key piece of this as well. And one of the things I'd love to see our General Assembly do is to provide incentives for districts to create more socioeconomically diverse schools. And that's something that we have previously had year after year in our legislative priorities. But I mean, that onus is also on our school board to really put effort behind that as well. So, I just wanted to frame that in a bigger picture, but because I do think that it's connected to mental health, it's connected to academic achievement, it's connected to opportunities. And so when we talk about laying the foundation, I think that is a critical piece of it. Thanks.
Thank you.
All All right, Ms. Newsom, I see your hand up.
I just want to thank you all for inviting me as president of the Norfolk PTA to be here and hear this presentation. I want to applaud the school board members and Dr. Birdsong and her team for their tireless efforts during this pandemic, which still is impacting schools and staff and families. So I appreciate you and I appreciate your time. The Norfolk PTA stands in support of Norfolk Public Schools with regard to the legislative priorities. And one of the ways to build community support is to keep the community engaged and involved. So the Norfolk PTA passed a position statement a couple years ago about school maintenance. And so we're going to continue to engage the community to tell parents and families what these schools look like, as well, like the pictures that you've shared today. Continue to show those, along with your board meetings on your website. Please send me the link to the PowerPoint so I can share that, because I think when people see it, they have a better understanding of what it looks like. And I think that will help build your support. And then as the PTA will go to the city council, I'll be in Richmond in January lobbying with the state PTA. So I'm going to bring up Norfolk as well. So I just want you to know that we are in this together. I fully support you, and we need to make sure that every school is safe for all students.
Thank you, Ms. Newsom, and thank you for the great work that the PTAs are doing in our schools. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Pryor, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here this morning. It's so great to see Senator Spruill and Delegate Angela Williams. This is the first opportunity we've actually had to all come together. Education Association of Norfolk is very grateful to Dr. Birdsong and for the school board for all the changes that have been made just even in the last few weeks with our teachers and the implemented unencumbered work days, supporting our students, providing us resources for our at-risk children. I have seen the psychiatrists and psychologists coming through. So pleased with it. But of course, there's always more we can do. And EAN will also be in Richmond on January 24th for Lobby Day. And some of the things that we're going to be looking for is providing funding and resources for teacher salaries to be closer to the national average teacher pay, as we all know, has been a struggle. Also increasing funding on the equity fund to provide resources towards our most at-risk children. The union is just so involved because we are the folks that know the names of these children sitting in the NPS seats. And we are working very hard to keep this at a we mentality as opposed to us versus them. And we've been doing a great job at it. We truly have. We will be speaking to our legislators in regards to the revised standards of quality, the standards of learning, school accreditation, and how they could help us towards that in regards to meeting the minimum federal requirements. And also the big one, addressing the school bus driver shortage. That is a big one for some of us. It has made our day longer because we're on fourth stagger. It really does change the dynamics of our homes in regards to daycare. And of course, it's winter, it's dark when we're going home, and it makes it a little more difficult. 2 days ago, Richmond City Public Schools did vote for collective bargaining. They were the first ones to win this after a 44-year ban. And of course, the Education Association of Norfolk is still looking to Norfolk Public Schools to include us in one of those victories. It's a process, for those that aren't aware, of having a binding agreement between the educators and the school division in regards to negotiating as equal partners. And that is all that we want. And we hope to continue working towards that process. We want to address the concerns of all of our students in regards to things like class sizes by making them smaller and getting more people on board to Norfolk Public Schools, which, by the way, those of us that did make it through the pandemic and we are still here, we're here because we love Norfolk Public Schools. We support them. We want to stay here. You're highly effective, well-trained teachers and staff choose to work at Norfolk Public Schools because the truth is we can go anywhere, but we want to be here. And there's a lot of misconceptions about collective bargaining. Bargaining is the best way to serve you, us, our students, and the community. So please keep us in your thoughts as we are doing that in Richmond on January 24th. And if I don't see everyone later on, please have a great holiday. You are appreciated for all you do. It is recognized by the Education Association of Norfolk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. And again, back at you. We appreciate you and what you're doing for our teachers and the staff, the EAN members. And, we really are glad to see you at the helm and to work with you moving forward. Thank you. And I do want to say to the delegation, please call on us. Please call on us when you have questions. Call on us if you need our support. Just as we are, calling on you and sharing our story and where we are and our plans moving forward. I'm going to just wrap up by saying thank you, Senator Spruill, Delegate Graves, Principal Berg, Mr. Jordan for being here. I'm trying to see if I'm missing anyone else who's joined us. I think Delegate Jones has left us. And thank you to our staff for the presentations. I appreciate the hour and a half you've spent with us this morning. And I hope this is the beginning of many conversations in support of our students and our teachers and our staff moving forward over through this next General Assembly session.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for all the information. And thank you so much for all the work that you all do. I know that you do a lot of work with limited resources. And so, and you're dealing with decades old problems that probably predate all of us on this call. But thank you again, and for all of the work that you do and for what you do in our communities with our children. And I just want to take the opportunity to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. If you celebrate it, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate, Merry, Happy it, and have a great New Year.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll adjourn.